You know, you go to the horse races to cheer the horse, but the horse doesn't run without the jockey. And that's how it is with podcasts. The podcast is the horse. You're the jockey. You have to be the compelling talent that makes me want to give a damn about you. And I think that that's the part that a lot of people lose sight of.
When is a podcast network more than just a revenue stream? In Rich Butler's case, he prioritizes discoverability, support, and longevity over short-term financial wins, which raises the question about what creators truly need from a network. His take stands out from structuring networks around operational ease and organic growth, not just ad sales. In a space where networks are constantly chasing CPMs and packaging inventory, the RageWorks Podcast Network focuses on helping podcasters create consistent content, giving them a home for distribution, using a main feed to aggregate all the shows on the network. Rich Butler built one to eliminate every piece of friction between creators and hitting publish, and he's been running it that way for 12 years without changing the model. Today's guest is Rich Butler, who's the founder of the RageWorks Podcast Network. Rich started out running his own podcast back in 2014, in the blog talk radio era. When that original show wrapped up after 400 episodes, he built a network specifically to guide creators over the tech hurdles, anchoring everything around a shared network feed. I'm Greg Wasserman, the host of this amazing show, Podcast Network Insights. I've spent 15 years in advertising sales, and since 2021, I've been immersed in the podcast industry. Along the way, I've built a lot of relationships and spent a lot of time with different podcasters, from the solo creators just starting out to, like my guest, the heads of podcast networks. If you've ever wondered whether joining a network makes sense or how these networks actually run, my goal is to give you a look behind the scenes so you can confidently navigate your next move, whether you host, produce, advertise, or like my guest, run a network yourself. As you listen to this conversation, I want you to pay attention to how Rich operationalizes the network feed for discoverability, onboarding, and even as a built-in test bed for new shows. The nuts and bolts of the process and the thinking behind it may unlock some creative ideas for your own podcast strategy. And stay tuned after the interview, as there's a little more about the conversation. And no, it's not to get you to subscribe and like the show on your favorite platform and leave a review. Though let's be honest, you should do that, especially if you're listening to this. So with that said, let's get into the conversation. Rich, we know the name of the show is Podcast Network Insights, so I always like to start when you hear the word podcast networks. What comes to mind?
A place where people can have a one-stop shop to consume various types of content produced by one group of people and served to multiple.
So the way that since you've been around for a while in the podcast space and you've got a podcast network of your own, how is it that that definition has helped model what you've built with the RageWorks Podcast Network?
So for me, I've always looked at it like the podcast network for me has always been a platform of discoverability, but also for a way for different shows to coexist. And my reasoning for it is because when you watch a regular television network, there's variety of shows. You got reality shows, game shows, sports, movies. It's all there. And you can be a fan of the network, but you may be a fan to just consume one type of thing. But if you think about it, when you watch the Super Bowl, for instance, when that's over, they'll debut a new show. And 9 times out of 10, those people that are there just for the Super Bowl, they may stick around and they may find their favorite show, or it may be something that sparks conversation. So that's the way I treat our network, because at the end of the day, there's more that unites us than divides us, you know?
So with that, what is the RageWorks Podcast Network?
So the RageWorks Podcast Network started because originally it was foundationally built off a podcast that I had done called My Take Radio. And that was a podcast that I did for countless years in audio format, later video format, and also streaming at the time through Blog Talk Radio. And what ended up happening was, as we were winding down the show. I had just got married and life was starting to life, I said to myself, 400 episodes is a good opportunity to start getting ready to hang it up. And as a result of that, a lot of people that worked on the show, contributed to the show, the website, etc., they got the podcast bug. So they said to me, "Hey, I want to start podcasting. What do I do? How do I do it?" And I said, "Sure, I'll show you how to do it. I'll give you all the tools." But there was a big hurdle that got in everyone's way, and that is the tech side of it, dealing with RSS feeds, getting your podcast listed, all the stuff. So I said, you know what? Let's form a network of shows. My show will be the anchor show, no different than Macy's being an anchor store at a mall. And, we'll use it as a launching pad to introduce these new shows. Some of you have been guests on the show, some of you contribute to the show. So it's organic that people start seeing these people do stuff. And I said, we'll form a network. I'll produce it, I'll distribute it. You just got to get me your stuff. And that was basically the foundation for how the network started. And it's funny because RageWorks is just an acronym. It's Rants About Gaming, Entertainment, and the Works. And when people ask what that means, it's when you order, if you're a New Yorker and you order, especially back in the 80s, you order a pizza with the works, it's a pizza with everything on it. So that's where the works comes in. It's a matter of there's various things here, but a lot of it is tied to those elements.
And what made you choose those elements?
It just was one of those things where I was already doing reviews and things for pop culture stuff anyway, and I was doing a lot of stuff in gaming and entertainment, and my original podcast focused on a lot of gaming and entertainment stuff. So it was just kind of like a fit that worked together to kind of bring that around.
I started as a podcaster. People came to me and they're like, "Hey, I want to do this." So not only did you start as production, but
Yep.
you skipped the let me do production. And then after I've done production, let's do a network. You said, nope, I'm going to combine those two. And right away, I'm going to do production with a network component, which most production companies are missing. So because you started this when did the RageWorks Podcast Network actually?
We started, I believe it was 2014.
All right. And we're in 2026 here for anyone that's listening. So 12 years ago, you had in your mind, not just let me produce, but let me create an aggregation, a network effect.
The reasoning for it was dual-fold. Number one, because we get more content. The more creators we work with, the more content we get. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to get people to notice. Number two was that because we already had an established feed that essentially became our network feed, it was a great way to litmus test shows and also dominate that gray space before a podcast launches. Because as you know, when you submit a podcast to a lot of these platforms, sometimes they launch instantaneously. Sometimes there's a delay of a week or two. So by having the network feed, what we end up doing is we launch the show on the network feed. It lets you start building your audience. And then once the show's individual feed goes live, then we flip the switch to publish the shows on its own unique feed. And then we syndicate it to the network.
All right. So for anyone that's listed, and regardless of when we're recording this, we've already released Peter Ferroli's from the Pantheon Network. And he's talked about that aggregation of one feed. And you're saying you did that, or you still do that. And that's how and once again, you don't see a lot of podcast networks doing that. So what has that, for the 12 years you've been doing this, do you still do that? Is that a feed that you still run all shows with inside the network, get their shows on that, and you can discover what you want. And then the ultimate goal is push people to the individual shows?
The reason is because a lot of people say, they get into podcasting and they have different things that bring them to the dance. But the thing about it that's important with the feed is that it's an organic sense of cross-pollination. Because if we're doing a podcast, let's say there's a gentleman doing a podcast about something political, for argument's sake, and he's talking political stuff, but then the podcast that follows is about sports. That doesn't necessarily negate that listener from the sports podcast, because you never know. The person that might be listening to that podcast may be a sports fan, may be into that particular genre of sports. So why not encourage that cross-pollination and allow people to consume multiple sources in one place?
Why don't you think a lot of networks are doing what you've been doing?
Because a lot of networks, unfortunately, are looking at a revenue first model. And the thing about it is that revenue is great, but content is king. And so if somebody comes to me and they have a good show idea, but they just don't have the tech or they don't have the wherewithal to deal with the minutia, but they create great content, then why can I not help them see that through?
All right. So you talked about the revenue side. So how does a network like yours under that model make money? Not just your network making money, but how is it the shows on the network are making money?
So we run things very unique in the sense that, we're not just the network, we also produce your podcast. We also handle your hosting. So we tell them, hey, this is what you're going to spend on hosting, but let's say a hosting plan is $30 and then we do some production. Like all of our shows are audio first and foremost. So if we're like, listen, you're going to pay this in hosting, you toss us a few bucks more and that covers everything. All you got to do is send your show, send your notes, and let me know what day you want it published. And let's say your show goes out Fridays on your main feed. It'll launch on the syndicated feed sometimes a week later, depending on how we structure it. And the thing about it is that way your show doesn't get cannibalized by the main feed because it's established. But more importantly, it gives people that exclusivity because it's your audience. So they're going to want to listen to it first there. In terms of monetization, the way we've always structured it is if someone solicits me directly and comes to me and says, hey, I like ABC podcasts, we want to advertise on them, then we'll usually do like an 80-20 split. If they come to me directly, if they go to the podcast host directly and they solicit them, then we don't ask for anything because if you think about it, they're already paying us to produce and distribute it. So why would we want a cut of that? And people say, yeah, but you're kind of cutting yourself off. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not always about the money because a lot of these folks that are on the network, minus a select few, they're all hobbyists. They're all kind of dipping their toes in and out, trying to see what works, what doesn't work. And we like to support that. And honestly, we have shows on our network that have now surpassed my show. Turnbuckle Tabloid, which is a show on our network, has over 525 episodes already. Shattering mine was the longest running show on the network. So, I'm proud of that. I encourage that.
So you would look at the Rageworks podcast network and the way you've built it is a community first. So we're all aligned in terms of similar kind of content and that therefore it makes it easier for you to cross promo, but also more of the production side, less on the ad sales side of it, which we think about a lot of other networks are focused on.
People look at the revenue first model, and this, you've been in the space. Getting companies to believe in podcasts monetarily is an incredible uphill battle. And more so because people are sitting there and they're saying, oh, cost per milli and this, and using all these different models to determine whether somebody's podcast is good or bad. And the thing about it is that if I have a podcast on the network that has 500 plus episodes on it and the numbers to back it up, why would I not want to encourage that? We both win because that person is motivated to do more shows. The network gets content. And at the end of the day, if they make a little money along the way, so be it. That's the thing. I think a lot of people, they're looking at, oh, we got to form a network because then we could package it up and offer it to somebody. Half of the people that think they know what they know about podcasting don't, because they're relying on the radio model, or they're relying on, oh, well, you get 5,000 downloads per episode. How do you know they're real? You know that. Like, come on, people can mess with that all the time. The way I look at it is I'd rather get $1 from 100 diehard fans than fight to get $1,000 from people that come and go. What I was going to say is that's where a lot of podcasters and networks, they lose the big picture because they're so driven on, oh, we got 25,000 cumulative downloads. Great. But what are you going to promote? And how's it going to align with all of the shows on your network? Think about it. If you have a couple of shows that, let's say, are a little more conservative, and then you have a couple of comedy shows, and you get approached by Dude Wipes, and they go, hey, we want to promote on all of your shows. Do you think the conservative shows that you might be producing or have on your network are going to want to be sponsored by Dude Wipes? No. But what you do in that case, at least for us, I'll be like, listen, maybe not for the network, this particular one, but hey, we have this show that might work. So you want to reach out to them directly. And then I'll just, again, facilitate that introduction.
Are you also doing then the programmatic side and taking a cut from there? So the value of being part of the network is not just the production side that you provide, the connection.
Only if I'm involved, meaning like if they come to me directly, if I facilitate it, then yes. But if it's not a fit for the network as a whole and I just send them to the host, again, I'm not going to double dip. It's just disingenuous at that point.
What about programmatic?
Programmatic, there's very few that come and do it. I mean, Captivate is our podcast host, so they let us do programmatic. A lot of times, any programmatic stuff that we do for the main feed is usually me announcing things that are applicable to all the shows. Like, hey, let's welcome this brand new podcast, new episodes airing every 2 weeks. Hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll run that for a month or two.
So then who is a good fit for the network? When you're looking at, I've said this every time, so many podcasts are trying to figure out networks are their place for me because they're going to help me grow. They're going to help me monetize whatever it is. What are the red flags that they should be looking at?
So for me, you have to go in with clear rules of engagement. Like you're going to come to a network and you're going to say, hey, I want you to help me grow my show. And you have to ask yourself, how are they growing their network? You have to ask that question first. Before you even ask them how to grow their show, you have to ask, how are you growing the network? What are you doing? What's your approaches? Because that's going to let you know how much or how little they're going to invest in really doubling down, helping you grow your show. Because if somebody says, oh, people come to us and you might not have somebody come to you for 6 months. So you're on a network expecting something for 6 months and then it doesn't happen. You have to set expectations. And I think that that's the first thing you have to do, regardless of whether you're a podcaster looking for a network or a network trying to get shows.
So if I wanted to come and join your network,
Yep.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for people that are motivated to create, meaning that if you're going to release a show every week, that means there should be an email with show notes and an episode every week. I shouldn't have to chase you. I shouldn't have to tell you, hey, are you putting a show out this week? Because that's what kills podcasts, not respecting your audience. They're not going to care. They just go on to the next one. We're fighting for attention constantly, and this applies to podcasts and it applies to media in general. We're fighting our own phones. We're fighting TV. We're fighting all these other things for attention. And if you drop the ball in the simplest thing, which is just keeping your audience informed, you're already behind the 8 ball.
You need them, whether they're hobbyists or they're serious about this as a business, right? You need them to be producing that content because that fuels the overall network. And so It's not just what you're saying in terms of their presence with their listener, but also, hey, I need this content for the network because that's how it's going to fuel. So goes to what else, because you said that a user or a podcaster that wants to join the network, you should be asking the question, what is the network doing for growth? So what is it that you're doing for growth besides ensuring that the podcast in the network are producing consistently?
So for me, what I ensure in terms of growth, for me, I just remove all of the headaches that kill podcasts. That's me, the John Wick of the situation. I come in, you don't like to edit, we'll edit. You don't want to set up an RSS, we'll set up the RSS. You don't want to go and submit everywhere, we remove roadblocks. That's where we come in. And a lot of networks, they just are like, put your show here. No, like if you put your show here, it's because you want us to do something for your show. If you say, hey, my editing isn't good, can you edit it? I'll be like, yeah. The edits come with real constructive feedback. So, I'm working with people hand in hand. Like, hey, your audio was kind of crap this episode. What's your setup? What mic are you using? Hey, you should try this. Hey, you should try that. Hey, you had 97 ums in your episode. Just, be aware, pause, don't rush through. So they get that with that.
So based on all that, then, Rich, would you say the value of way that you've structured RageWorks Podcast Network is you've got someone who's been doing this for 20 years. You are in the niche of what RageWorks stands for, you are looking for the support of an expert like yourself to help you, guide you, and that's really going to be a good fit for your network.
Yep, we want people that are motivated creators. I mean, in an ideal world, of course, we would want creators who, create content that kind of is in the same ecosystem. But the problem is that if you try to do that, you alienate people because again, I could be someone that likes to watch the UFC, but also likes to watch the Food Network, but also, does pottery. So I'm not going to turn away a podcast that has that, let's say a pottery podcast just because I don't do pottery, but guess what? Somebody might. And that person may feel that they'd be like, hey, I have a pottery podcast. I have, a sports podcast. It's a one-stop shop for me.
So then when you've modeled and you think about podcasters in general, how are you finding them? How are they coming to you and saying, you know what, this sounds like a good network for me versus all these other networks that exist out there, which is part of the reason I've got this show, because there's so many networks that no one knows about, but they could be a great fit for you.
So for me, a lot of shows that we get on the network are referrals. We get a lot of referrals of people that are doing a show and they'll be like, hey, my buddy wants to do a show, or my sister's interested in starting a podcast. And those are usually most of the shows that come on board are usually referrals. Occasionally, we have some studio clients that we put on the network because we want to help them start building that audience. So if you're a studio client for our brick and mortar business and you want to have that as a feature, then we'll put their shows on the network as well, because like I said, it's more content for us.
And that we were talking about this before we started recording, and it came up because I'm glad you brought it up. You actually have a physical studio. So there's another component. It's you're geographically in the New York area. You have a physical studio. So part of your network
Yes.
business
And more
model is
importantly,
not just.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I was going to say part of the business model is not just, hey, we have this feed that we can help you aggregate. We have the hosting. We have my knowledge of 20 plus years of doing this. We have the production side. But if you are physically here, great, come in and I've got a studio component for you, which also becomes your business development side as well.
Any local creator that works with us has been in the studio. And the thing about it is, whether you're in the 5 boroughs of New York City or on Long Island where our studio is, if you have a show on the network and you want to do, because we have some older gentlemen that they do a podcast and they are in Manhattan in the city, and they'll come out to the island once or twice and they'll record a couple of batches of episodes and they'll save those for evergreen when they're on vacation, or maybe they want to release that particular episode that week. So what we end up doing with that, it also starts helping them become comfortable with video. So if they ever want to make that jump to a video podcast, then they've already got their feet wet too.
So you bring up video. I hate doing it, but we always got to talk about video. Where are you seeing, doing this for 20 years, where do you see video right now? I know if we look at your website, there's a prominent video button there. So clearly you are seeing as a traditional audiophile going into the video realm, but where does video fit in within your view, but also the network's view?
So here's the thing. A lot of people are using video and there's a big drive to drive a wedge between audio and video. And the thing about it is that you need both of them, but they're going to serve different purposes, meaning that you always have to make sure your audio, it doesn't matter how many 4K cameras you got and bokeh and great lenses. If your audio sucks, it sucks. And the thing about that is that if you're driving to work in the morning, you're not driving to work watching a video. You see what I'm saying? If you're on a plane and the Wi-Fi on the plane isn't good, guess what you can still listen to? Audio podcasts. And the thing about it is that an audio podcast, aside from requiring, good audio first and foremost, teaches you to just be more comfortable with inflection, with storytelling. Because you have to remember, if you remember old like Superman radio programs that they would play and things like that, War of the Worlds. Like all of
Yeah.
that was told through inflection and sound and storytelling. And for a lot of podcasters that are jumping from audio to video, like audio gives them that comfort to tell that story. And then video just becomes a way to articulate it better. So it's not a an us versus them. It's a matter of you need the audio first and foremost, and the video complements it. Now, if you want to dive in video first and not do audio, that's great. But you know what the problem is with that? You're creating more ways for things to go wrong. Because you got to remember, like right now, we're recording on Riverside. If Riverside is not running right that day, your video is going to be, it is what it is. But you can call somebody on a phone, or you can, use Zoom or Skype, which, I'm dating myself, which was back in the day. But guess what? You record audio either individually, what's called a double ender, or you record once, and at least you still have that audio file. So you're saved. And I think that that's a big problem. I remember when we used to podcast before video podcasting was a thing, I used to put the shows on YouTube with a stationary image. And people used to be like, why are you wasting time putting them on YouTube? There's no video. And it was because a lot of my listeners would say YouTube is the only thing that's not blocked at work. And think about it. It took me an extra 10, 15 minutes to do that. But guess what? Now it gave an audience a way to consume that show that they couldn't have done otherwise. And you know what? An older person that doesn't know what a podcast app is or doesn't want to add another app to their phone, they know what YouTube is.
Statistically, they just showed that the 55 and older female market is where there's a huge potential on getting them into the podcasting space. So there you go. If they know YouTube, how do we move them into an audio experience when they're flying or doing anything?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you could watch a video on a treadmill, but you know what? If you're running or if you're doing an intense exercise or if you're sprinting, it's easier to listen than to try and watch. You get sweat in your eyes. How are you going to watch the show at that point?
So then one thing I want to touch on is, what is the onboarding experience like? And I want to touch on that because that becomes a very unique component for anyone that is joining a network, and specifically joining your network. If they're coming in as a production client, if they're coming in as, hey, this is what I'm getting from your network, what is your onboarding experience like? And what makes that unique compared to potentially other network?
So our onboarding experience when it comes to bringing shows on, we always do a discoverability call or email usually, and we try to kind of get an understanding of what they're bringing to the table, because we've had some people that they already have a podcast established, but they just want to offload the publishing and everything else. They just want to be talent. So we've had instances where we'll onboard somebody that already knows the stuff, and sometimes that's just a blessing for me because it's just less technical stuff that I have to try and distill to a person that doesn't know it. But I like onboarding new people and helping them launch from start to finish, because the beauty of that is that as I'm onboarding them, I'm also training them to be, good podcasters, mic technique, what software, what equipment. So there's a lot of that, going back to one of the shows that we produce, which is David and Stu Unhinged. They're two older gentlemen. And the first thing we did, we had the discoverability call, and I said, this is what we're going to do. And I said, here's a grocery list of what you need to buy. And sure enough, they bought a PodTrack P4, nice and easy, two small mics, and they record at their dinner table on Fridays. They take the file from the SD card, or they'll plug in the PodTrack, and next thing you know, on a Google Drive, there's a episode there. David, one of the hosts, he'll send me an email, hey, my new episode is there. And usually I'll give them, audiograms. So I'll give them two for their little social media accounts that they have. And then that's it. And the thing about it is they get 100, 200 episodes, 200 downloads a month. And that's great. And they're learning all about the different aspects of production. So they know, oh, let me go look at my Spotify metrics. And obviously I'll give them reports from Captivate, from our podcast host, and I'll tell them, hey, this is what was working, this is what wasn't. Hey, you guys had an off month. Hey, we're getting into the holiday season. So like I said, they're getting from an onboarding perspective, they're getting training along the way so that if they, whether they continue their podcast with me or if they decide, hey, we want to go on our own or whatever it is, I know that I gave them a leg up to be an asset to the podcast industry as a whole.
Do you have to work with you to be in the network? Is that a requirement?
What do you mean?
Do I have to have you produce or manage any of the component of the show? Or it's like,
Nope.
you know what, Rich, I'm going to do it all. I just want to join your network because I love what you're doing.
We have a few of those too. And that's just, I'll be like, listen, a couple of bucks to cover the hosting. That's it. Like just because, again, it's just bandwidth.
So I'm seeing a trend and I mean, I've seen the trend, but now doing the show, this is what I love, is bringing this trend to more people's attention, is the way you're running your network. I mean, you could be making a lot more money, I'm guessing, from an ad
1000%.
sales standpoint. So why? Why is it the way you've been running the network, the way you've been running it?
So I'm a firm believer in leaving the room better than when you entered it. And the thing about it is, sure, I could charge hundreds of dollars and all of this stuff, but I always remember that podcasting was built on the basics. And that's the problem that so many people lose sight of. You don't need the $400 Shure SM7B. You don't need the lenses and the cameras. You need good messaging. And I always use an analogy, and I'll share it with you. You go to the horse races to cheer the horse, but the horse doesn't run without the jockey. And that's how it is with podcasts. The podcast is the horse. You're the jockey. You have to be the compelling talent that makes me want to give a damn about you. And I think that that's the part that a lot of people lose sight of. And as somebody who runs a network, yeah, I'd love to put my head on a stack of hundreds every night when I go to bed. But you know what it is? I also look at the long game, and I look at it like this is somebody who I help them see their dream through. And for me, that's a great currency. It's a great thing because at the end of the day, I'll remember when they started, but I also remembered where they were when they finished. And people have gone on to do other things. Turnbuckle Tabloid, our longest running podcast, Jay Santee, the host, he started his own little network. So I have like a network within a network, which is hilarious. Like he rebranded as New York WrestleMedia, and then under New York WrestleMedia, he has all these different wrestling themed podcasts that he too produces, and then he sends to me, and then he repurposed his Turnbuckle Tabloid feed to New York WrestleMedia, so now there's a network within a network for his shows. And this is a guy that started as a listener. We became friends, and he's, like I said, 500 plus in, and then he's launched other shows that are spinoffs of his. Like he has a sports show, he has, Headlocks in History, and he now is watering new podcasters that are getting into the space for that genre, in this case, wrestling. And at the end of the day, everyone wins because new podcasters join the space. He gets to do some cool shows. We get more content on the network. Everyone wins.
So I'll take that. If everyone wins in your model, what models are people losing in?
I think the models that people are losing in are the people that are trying to put foot to gas and are trying to get paid immediately. I always tell people that podcasting shouldn't be the number one source of income. It should be part of your income. And that's the problem. Like people who come in, and I'll give people some easy game. Like you're doing your podcast, you're talking about books. The first thing you should have done if you're going to be talking about books on your podcast is sign up for an Amazon affiliate account and link to all of those books in your show notes so that when you write your show notes, which you should be writing, you got a link to those. And that's easy. And yeah, you might make $10 here, $20 there, a couple of bucks here, but guess what? That's your hosting that you're covering. And it might open up some speaking engagements. Here's a thought, you might make friends. How about that? You might make friends. You might align yourself with someone that down the road may offer you an opportunity, all of because of your podcast. Like all like, and I'm gonna be a little blunt. I've done a lot of cool shit from just wearing a Logitech headset and talking my nonsense for 10 years. Covering New York Comic Con, going to Toy Fair, meeting different wrestlers, meeting different fighters. I got to shoot a Muay Thai fight. I wasn't even a sports photographer, and they were like, "Hey, you cover MMA? You want to come do this fight?" I'm sitting there getting bled on, taking photos of a Muay Thai fight, but it was the coolest thing ever, and it's an amazing story. You have to define what kind of currency you're in the game for. And don't get me wrong, we all love dead presidents, love having them in our bank accounts. But there's other stuff that you can't put a price tag on, experiences, memories. Think about it. You've been in this space. Now you're doing podcasts. Think of all the awesome conversations and wisdom you've taken away from people. Think about going to podcast movement, whatever podcast events you go to. Oh man, that's Greg. He does this. He works for RSS. He does all this other stuff. I met Greg here. Think about it. I've known you for a long time through different phases of your career. And every time you'll be like, "Hey, Rich, I'm doing this thing, man. You want to try it out? You want to check it out? What do you think?" I'll be like, "Cool." You want to know why? Because you gave a damn. Because you cared about what I was doing. You're a genuine asset to the space.
I appreciate it. But everything you're saying is exactly what I believe. I mean, this is also why we probably get along.
Yep.
I believe the ROI in podcasting is truly relationships development, and everything you said. Like, what was I able to do because of this podcast? What was
Yep.
I able to do because of these conversations? What doors was I able to open that led to not just a sponsorship deal or a brand deal, but something that's far more economically advancing for me than, I don't know, $5,000 or $3,000 or 20, whatever it is, because now you're a media space and now you're in the media game. And it's like, all right, I got to grow this so I can get the sponsorship, as opposed to I've just got to have conversations and be
Yep.
doing this for 500 episodes.
And it's a trial by fire. And I want to give you something. A lot of people talk about ROI and, my return on investment and this and this and this. ROI to me means return on interest, meaning that if people are interested in you, there is a return. Because at the end of the day, if you're a compelling host or a compelling guest, people are going to ask, where can I learn more about this person? How can I support this person? This and this and this. I'll give you an example. I almost killed Rageworks and the podcast network because of a conversation with Gary Vaynerchuk on stage for a podcast he was doing. So I had the conversation. I was telling him about a podcast that I was doing at the time with my buddy. I wasn't really like talking about the network, and he was just like, maybe you're not that good. Like legit, you could find the video. And he was just like, you've been doing it a long time. You clearly like it. He goes, but maybe you're a great talent and a shitty CEO. And I was just like, well, damn. And I remember I called my wife and I was like, this sucks, and my wife put it in perspective for me. But you know what happened as a result of that? I created the podcast network shortly after that interaction. And,
Oh, wow.
And some of the people that are on the network were like, we're glad you didn't listen to him, because then we wouldn't have a place to do shows or tell our stories. So think about how crazy that is. And mind you, again, I was interested in his product, in his brand. The return on that interest was a reality check written to me. And he always said something which was very important. And he used to say, don't consume my stuff and not do anything.
Mm.
So he encouraged you to consume less and do more. So when that happened, obviously it was very humbling for me and a big reality check. But guess what? I stopped drinking the Kool-Aid. And I said, I'm going to double down on the biggest investment that works, me. And, the network laid the bricks for me to open the studio. Because during the pandemic, that's how the studio was born. People were like, hey, Rich, you got a studio in your house. Do you mind if I come by and record? And obviously, during COVID, you didn't want to be around nobody. But there were a few trusted people that would come and record at home at my house. I remember saying, I'm like, hey, if there was a place that all of this was set up and you could just walk in and knock out a podcast and, either edit it yourself or we'd edit it, would you pay for that? And people were like, yeah. And next thing you know, I was putting a deposit on a space, and here we are.
There we are. Well, as we gear towards, so you talked about one of my favorite things, books. So what is one of your books that you would recommend to people?
I would probably say Gary Vee's book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. You need both of those for different reasons, because you need to be, when you're a podcaster, you're not just the podcaster. You're also the booking agent. You're also the editor. You're also your social media manager. So you have to be able to convey your messages on all of those, in all of those different hats that you wear. Thus, jab, 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 right hook. Like, you have to be able to articulate what your show's about. You need to make people interested in wanting to be on your show. You need to be compelling. But I recommend the subtle art for the simple fact that podcasting, sometimes you got to look at that graphic and see 10 downloads and feel like crap and be like, wow, only 10 people. And what I used to do, when people used to tell me that, I go, fill a room with 10 people and let me know how that looks. Fill a room with 25 people. Let me know what that looks like. Because at the end of the day, these are people that are genuinely tuning in for you. That's 10 people that are hanging on to your every word because you brought them there. Those 25 people, you're somebody's training partner. You're somebody's passenger on their ride to work. You're sitting next to somebody, in their head telling a story while you're on a train. You're somebody's layover buddy.
It's like not everyone's able to fill a stadium, but if you're able to fill a room with 20 people, can't we be happy with that, right?
Yep. And on top of that, more importantly, is you have to use that as other ways to market yourself. If you tell great stories and you're a great storyteller, then you need to do more. And the first thing I tell people is the easiest. Be on more podcasts. Tell more stories. Share the hard stuff, share the pretty stuff. Because everybody's going to draw inspiration from it somewhere. When Gary Vee dissected me on stage, all I got were plenty of emails, messages. Like, it was crazy. I didn't even know that he was filming it until he put out an episode of his show. And I'm like, why is my inbox so full? And it was just people, obviously you had people shilling their stuff. And then people were like, hey, man, your story was really resonated with me and all the stuff. Think about it. So me being dissected on stage taught someone a lesson. Why can't I help that?
So what's one podcast that you'd recommend people may not know about, or maybe they do know, but more people should listen to it?
I like what used to be Renegade Radio. It's now the Jay Ferrugia podcast. Jay Ferrugia is a strength and conditioning coach. And what he ended up doing was his podcast obviously talks about fitness and all the stuff, but he started doing more life things. And he started niching down and niching down and niching down. And as you hear the podcast and you hear that progression, like now his podcast is geared towards, athletes, but also, men that are over 30 or in their 40s looking to be stronger, better operators, better leaders, better husbands, better fathers, better lovers, whatever the case is. And watching that progression is just cool. Obviously, I like going to the gym and I take a lot of the wisdom from that podcast, but I liked that progression because I felt that was really, really, really good. In terms of the only other show that I would put in the same vein, I like the podcast Morning Chat, which is Mark Ronick and his crew, because I like hearing people talk about different facets of podcasting without preaching about why their method is the best or, creating more discourse. But I will say this, and I'll say it to you, and I encourage it. We need more discourse in podcasting. We can't just drink the proverbial Kool-Aid of, this guy's been in the space forever, he's right. No, not necessarily. I don't want to hear audio's better than video's better than audio. No. Like, it's not the case.
Wherever your audience is, give them what they want.
Give them what they want. But more importantly, be of service. That's the thing. Like, if people are giving you their attention, time you can't get back. So respect that. So, like, if you're going to take a week off, make sure, like, hey, guys, I'm taking a week off. Make sure to check out some of our old episodes or do something. Talk to your audience. Engage with your audience. Be of service. Too many people want to gatekeep all this stuff in podcasting. And come on, Greg, half of this stuff you could find on Google. People are like, you should write an ebook. Why? Why am I going to sell you a course? You're going to pay $400 for a course that you're going to not produce a damn thing. That's the worst part. People will be like, I bought this course and I'm going to do this. Why? Buy a microphone, record into your phone, put something out, you know,
And just stay consistent and keep growing.
stay consistent, keep growing, and understand that it's going to suck. And if you're going into it trying to line your pockets, you better have something else. You better be good at something else. It's that simple.
Well, as we wrap up here, Rich, we've covered a lot from your history, why Ragework Podcast Network operates, how it makes money, how podcasters should be thinking. Is there anything that you'd want to leave our audience?
For me personally, I think that the thing I'd want to leave your audience with is just create the thing. Whether it's the podcast, the YouTube channel, the video, the blog, create it so that you're not sitting there going, I could do that better. Do it. And if it sucks, embrace the suck. Embrace that it's not good. Embrace that it's not ideal. But you know what? In those failures are people that are cheering you on. You're going to have a bunch of anonymous people that think it's great, that think it's cool, that think, oh, with a little tweak, a little better audio, man, this guy's got something. Think about this, and I'll tell you people this. I've been in the space 26 years. Most people don't even know I exist. And I am totally cool with it. I don't write think pieces on LinkedIn about podcasting, looking for validation. I could give a damn less. I want to leave the room better than when I entered it. That's it.
That is why I'm bringing you on, because I think more people should know, like, and trust you. But also, as I see, there's so many podcasts out there that think podcast network is the way to go. And if that's a fit, if Rage is a fit, that's making this space a little bit better.
Yep. And if you got questions, not even from a network, ask. There's no discovery call for $9.95. Like, ask. But also be respectful of the fact that Google first, then ask. ChatGPT first, then ask. Hey, I asked ChatGPT this and it said this. What do you think? Like, I'd rather answer that than how do I do a podcast? Like, get out of here.
Oh, on that note, Rich, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Rich. And thank you always for believing in what we're doing here.
Greg, keep up the great work. Keep being an asset like we've always talked about. Keep spreading that message. And more importantly, just keep being of service. Everybody that always talks about you whenever you post your stuff, sharing work opportunities and things for people, that's huge. You don't have to do that. And you do it even now. And I respect you for that. And I'm glad you continue to do that and lay the groundwork for others.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it, man.
Of course. You got it, brother.
Well, you made it this far, and I truly appreciate it. Like, really, I know most of us don't make it to the end of the podcast. So if you allow me, though, a few extra minutes of your time, let me share you some of my thoughts on my conversations here with Rich. At the start, I brought up the idea of a podcast network being more than a revenue stream, a place for discoverability, support, and actual longevity. So coming back to that idea, what really hit me was how central Rich's network feed model is for enabling organic growth, not just downloads or exposure. Beyond that, there are a few other pieces I can't ignore. First, how Rich actively aims to take work off the creator's plate, not just the production, but all the details that typically bog people down. He doesn't just point to resources, he becomes that technical backbone, setting up feeds, offering hands-on editing, and even giving a straightforward feedback around mic techniques or show notes. That's not how most networks operate. It makes you rethink what support from a network can actually mean for creators. Removing friction completely changes what's possible. Second thing that came to me was the revenue model is completely counter to what most see. Instead of chasing every ad dollar, Rich treats production and support as the core offering. If a brand approaches through the network, they split the revenue. But if someone comes to the show directly, it doesn't take a cut. It shifts the focus away from just monetizing into strengthening the creator's independence, which makes you think about how incentives shape relationships inside a network. And the last thing that kind of stood out to me was the long game thinking here is different. Rich is clear. Most podcasters in the ecosystem are hobbyists. We're just trying to figure things out, and that's by design. The goal isn't squeezing out the largest check in month one. It's about helping people stick around long enough to finally find their footing. That's not the standard playbook in podcasting, and it makes me question what actually moves the needle for networks and creators over the long haul. Well, that's kind of what stuck out to me. I'm sure you have your own views and thoughts, and I would love to hear them. But once again, thanks for tuning in. To the 2 people who gave me a 5-star review on Apple already, thank you. I appreciate it and could use all those of your reviews. The show is produced by the amazing team at Stories and Strategies. If you don't know them, I suggest you reach out and learn about them. Of course, I'm using RSS.com for my podcast hosting. Podcast hosting is more than just storage. They provide so many features to ensure a great podcast experience, distribution, monetization, and more. Northflow is my dedicated podcast management platform, and Castmagic is the tool I use for my content repurposing. As they say, life is about time and relationships. You have no clue where one conversation is going to take you. This is why I'm able to have this show. This is why I network for a living and why you're able to tune into these conversations. And therefore, you have no clue where by listening to these conversations will take you, whether it's now or in the future. I live on LinkedIn. Reach out. Let's talk. To those of you who have already done so, I appreciate you. That alone means that this podcast has value and is creating connections. Discoverability is difficult, and as we talked about on the show, I have a newsletter that's always highlighting podcasts that I think you should listen to. Subscribe where you listen, tune in every Thursday, and until next time, I appreciate you.